Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to this presentation. So I'm Halina Brown. I'm a professor emerita from Clark University in the Boston area in the US and a co-founder of SCORE.
Good morning or afternoon. My name is Vergragt. I'm a professor emeritus at TU Delft in the Netherlands, and I'm also a co-founder of SCORE.
So the main point of this presentation is this. We need to transition to a society that's less consumer. And in order to do that, we need to pull into this conversation more than just climate community. We have to include many other interest groups within the society. That will require a common language among all the relevant social groups and framings that can accommodate all.
So the IPCC estimated in their latest assessment report that no less than 40 till 70% of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions can be achieved by changing consumer lifestyles. So, and a more recent estimate by Klaus Hubacek and his team in 2025 estimated 30 to 40%, especially among most affluent countries and affluent cities in both global north and global south. He estimated at 24% of the population. But how do we do that? We now know that information provision to people is very ineffective. That coercive methods through policy create a lot of backlash, and that successful pilots, there are a lot of successful pilots around the world. Eco-villages and all kinds of neighborhood initiatives and so on. The problem is that they remain small and that they have a problem of going mainstream. So the real question is, how do you mobilize a large segment of the population to change their lifestyles in order to mitigate CO2 and other greenhouse gas reduction?
Well, I agree with you that you recognize that education, coercive methods, small-scale initiatives have their serious shortcomings, and so far they haven't worked. And I also agree we need to develop this conversation, but how do we do that? I see several big barriers to doing. Let me enumerate three of them. One is that the concept of sustainable consumption in lifestyles means different things to different people. So take, for example, businessmen and economists. For them, sustainable lifestyles may mean stagnant economy and business. Take a mindfulness instructor. For them, sustainable lifestyles means something entirely different, like greater inner peace and less distraction from things that truly matter to human well-being. On the other hand, an ecologist may think about resources saved and damage avoided. So this is really one problem. There are two other problems I am identifying. The second one is that the idea of sustainable consumption doesn't really have a political champion. It's a political orphan in a current political climate. And it is very different from the successful environmental movement from the 1970s and 80s. In that movement, which built impressive institutions and policies and mobilized society, several different interest groups got together into one coalition. Scientists, general public, social justice advocates, some members of the government community, they all got together and learned to speak the same language. So they considered themselves one big movement. And again, so this, we don't have it, at least not yet here, with respect to sustainable consumption. And the third reason is that most people associate sustainable consumption with loss and deprivation, while high consumption is associated with success in life. And I confronted it very vividly as an activist. I've been for the last 10 years a big activist in my city, Newton, Massachusetts, a city of about 100,000 people, about reducing our carbon footprint. Everybody agrees in our city that the main source of emissions is residential housing sector. Everybody agrees that if we want to reduce significantly our emissions, it has to go down. And that's about as far as we agree. People are happy in both environmentalists, the municipality, the activists, everybody agrees that we should work on efficiency and renewable energy sources. But when I bring the question of or proposal to reduce the size of houses, and houses, new single-family houses in Newton right now are between 400 and 500 square meters in size, very large. When I mentioned that, the conversation stops. It's a taboo. Nobody is going to. Why is that? Yeah, of course, the positional consumption is part of it, and but there is more to it. When you go deeper, you discover that a large, expensive house is the best protection against poverty in old age, and especially with major illnesses in a country that has minimal safety. What does it mean? What it means that not only we have to talk about reducing houses and efficiency and all that, we have to also talk about social safety net. And suddenly the conversation is very different.
So yes, of course. So what you're basically saying is that we need to include in this conversation completely different people, groups of people, like business people, economists, energy, social justice advocates, city planners, and you name it. And as Halina just explained, you need a different language in order to have this conversation among very diverse groups. So we are aiming for a vocabulary, as we call it, that includes concepts like beauty, work-life balance, foundational economy, advertising and subvertising, value, things that matter to people in their ordinary life and in their daily struggle. Conversation that exposes not only the obvious connection between those aspirations, that exposes the obvious connection between those conversations and less consumerism.
Well, you know, what you are saying when you mention these concepts that have to be included brings to mind the extensive international comparative research that has been done, covering dozens of countries and year after year after year trends, looking at the key factors in making societies thrive. More specifically, this were self-reported surveys where people were asked about their sense of the level of satisfaction with their life. And very interesting results emerged from that. Essentially, 4 key factors emerged. Societies where there is existential security, meaning strong institutional social safety net, do better on human flourishing. Societies where social trust and social justice are strong do better. And that, of course, involves income inequality or equality and well-functioning institutions that respond to people's needs. A strong economy matters, of course, because there must be sufficient resources to provide the safety net and to satisfy basic needs. And finally, culture matters too. Culture, societies that are more socially liberal, tolerant, reciprocal, which means people are interacting personally with other people rather than highly individualistic, authoritarian, and traditional, are doing better on the life satisfaction. So once again, when you listen to that list, what we see is that this issue of existential security, social justice, and social trust bubble up to the surface. And if you allow me one moment, I want to highlight, for example, why inequality matters. Inequality drives consumption. People try to emulate those above them and more urgently to distance themselves from those below them in a very unequal society, because going lower means huge change in the life, in quality of life. But also inequality kills social trust and prevents collective action as a result. If people don't feel we are in it together, they are not going to have social trust, and they are not going to contemplate taking collective action, which we need.
So really the question is, would you bring each of these advocates together in one big tent and into a single conversation? That's the reason why we created this book. Halina, can you hand me this book?
Yeah.
And it's heavy. And this is the book that we created together with 120 plus authors. The aims of this book are finding and communicating the right language for a society-wide conversation about consumption and lifestyle. And this common language should bridge silos and which would be a key factor in advancing a transition to a less consumerist society. The book elaborates 87 concepts that are essential, in our view, to be included in this broadly based societal conversation. And what makes the book very interesting is that each of these concepts is cross-linked with a number of other concepts. Very few have consumption in their title. And here in this next slide, we show you all the 87 concepts, and we will give you a few examples in a few moments. These are short essays. They are not more than about 1,700 words. We urge the authors to use as little jargon as possible and make it understandable for a wide public. each of the 87 concepts has a definition, the history of the concept, different perspectives of the concept, and uses of the concept potentially or already now for advancing the transition to post-consumerism. So here we have a few examples. Halina?
So I chose for the example, maybe we should pause for a moment so people see the slide.
No.
Okay, so for an example, I chose the concept Universal Basic Services, authored by Anna Kut and Ian Go. So this concept was developed in response to the wealth inequality and also in response to another concept that has been quite widely discussed, universal basic income. The concept appeals primarily for social justice advocates, not so much to the climate community, for obvious reasons, right? But here is the essay about universal basic services, where the authors are linking UBS with concept actually central to the issue of climate and sustainable consumption. And here are some of the terms that they included in this essay: donut economics, consumption corridors, personal carbon allowance, foundational economy, wealth inequality, existential security, and sufficiency. And these terms are described elsewhere in the book and are highlighted in a bold print in this essay. What does it result in? By doing so, they bring into the conversation both climate community, social justice community, and ecological economics community, which is exactly what we are trying to do. So this is one of the examples.
Thank you. So another example is the circular economy and society. So we all know, or think to know, that we know what circular economy is. But the circular economy really started out as a very technocratic concept, very narrow concept of recycling, reusing of materials. So in this essay, Calista Friant and Melanie Erben explain about the evolutionary expansion of this concept. You know, it started to include much more than the material, closing of material loops themselves. It started to include the social groups, and it ended with a much more holistic vision on this concept. So in this essay, they link their concept to other concepts in the book, like grassroots innovations, alternative consumer cooperatives, degrowth, extended producer responsibility, buen vivir, and Ubuntu. These are concepts that you not necessarily immediately connect to the circular economy. And I think that makes this book very interesting to make these connections.
Okay, so one more example, but this one really brief. The concept of choice editing. Choice editing is a policy response that involves encouraging some kinds of consumption and discourages other kinds of consumption. The goal being to reduce consumerism and carbon footprint. And it can include price signals, some direct coercion, pulling some items off the shelves altogether, and so on. All great and good, but this kind of approach may backfire very easily. There may be resentment against this heavy-handed interference. So I would say for the proponents of choice editing that they read another essay in the book entitled Risk Assessment. Risk Perception. And that will tell them a great deal about how general public responds to what they perceive as risk or perceive as threats to them, to their good quality of life. And according to this well-accumulated knowledge, that adapt their policies to be more effective.
So, as we already said, we think that the value added of the book is not only the concept themselves, but also the linkages between them. And rather than to show you all the linkages, which is too much, here is a word cloud that gives you an impression of the wide range of concepts that are covered in this book. So we also want to emphasize that this book is open access. Yeah. So if you, as a teacher, want to buy a copy, we would encourage you, but for your students, you can recommend open access to each of the chapters, plus a very elaborate introduction. At this point, we want to introduce the editorial team: Lewis Akenji, Halina, Tom Smith, Laura Wallnofer, and myself. We had a fantastic collaboration during nearly 2 years. And of course, we want to thank here all the 120 plus authors whom we really give a hard time to rewrite their contributions and made it what it is. To summarize, the talk focused not only on the promotion of this book, but more widely on how to advance the transition to post-consumerist sustainable society and the role that language and conversation plays into that. So the title of this book is Vocabulary for Sustainable Consumption and Lifestyles, but we consider the subtitle more important, which is A Language for Our Common Future. We think that the book offers a lot of different ways to talk about addressing of consumption, how to transition to a more sustainable lifestyle, and we hope that it provides connections to allow us to make a more interesting and effective conversation with completely different people than ourselves.
And of course, as soon as we finished the book, we realized how many other terms, concept terms, were missing from it. But of course, language is never complete. It evolves with use. So we hope it's used. And then maybe another editorial team will step forward, and some of you, and produce stage 2, volume 2 of this book. For whom did we write? We wrote it as we are an academic community to a large extent. Of course, we hope that it will be used as a text, in a very wide range of courses, in sociology, social psychology, economics, sustainability, and so on. So students in those areas will understand the complexity of the system of consumption, social system of consumption, and will understand the links between what may be their primary interest at the moment and all these other areas. But we also hope that over time, short time, hopefully, it will make its way into the hands of civil society organizations that are interested in social justice, equality, social trust, not only the grassroots organizations, but also the major professional organizations and the policymakers. So please help us disseminate these ideas and this book among the widest range of people in Europe. Thank you.
And thank you all. And I would like to announce that this book will appear on September 27, 2025, just a short time away from now. And that as a soon to be followed by a wiki, which will be also, of course, open access. And this wiki will provide opportunities to expand this vocabulary without having to write a completely different book. And this wiki will be promoted and it has been developed by the Hot or Cool Institute. I will also, at the end, I want to thank Hot or Cool Institute, Lewis Akenji, for a great collaboration with Skorai. This was a joint production of Skorai and Hot or Cool. Thank you very much.
And we thank the organizers of the conference for inviting us and giving us this opportunity. I think this was